Sean, you want to do the honors? We're live.
Yeah, we are live at the 12 Cent Treehouse. It's Sunday at 8 with a very happy Scott Collins clapping his hands. Today, we are going to talk about what makes a great story in comics, TV, and film. I'm Sean McLaughlin, writer producer, and with me, as always, is the lovely and yet terribly surprised Scott Collins.
Hey, everybody.
The terribly not surprised Jeff Johnson.
It takes a lot to stun me.
And the abnormally tall but incredibly handsome Stephen Jones.
Hey.
And just for the hegemony of time, here it is Monday at noon, but for Sean it is Sunday at 8. So there.
And for everyone else, it's 5 Pacific.
Yeah. So since there's two of us, we win because that's how colonialism works. There's more of us. It is now must be 5.
The rules of time travel.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about I think something that's really interesting topic, and I think that it's hotly debated, as you'll see today, like what makes a good story, right? Like, so Steve, you wanted to talk more about like what we think makes a good story, and I think that's probably best, since even though we're experts and have lots of experience, I think it is pretty much a personal experience, right?
I'm going the whole liter and a half today, guys.
Woohoo! Good. So in 10 minutes,
Sugar rush, sugar rush.
Nice.
What makes a good story, Jeff? This was your that's a beautiful Space Phantom, Scott. What makes a good story, Jeff?
Hang on a second. Let's put Scott's thing in there. That's a great character.
Is awesome.
I love that. Well, I mean, for me personally, a great story is something that that affects me, that I resonate with, that affects me emotionally, that I feel some sort of connection to. So even if it's no matter what the genre, if it makes me feel something, then for me that's a great story. Like if it gets me to think or gets me to have some sort of reaction, I think that's the kind of story that I like to experience. But that's for me. That's when, for me, a story, especially when it comes to comics.
Give us an example, Jeff. What's something that resonates with you?
Right? Like, so, while you draw, Scott, I will tell you about my childhood. So when I was a kid, one of the things that made a great comic book story for me was that I knew who the characters were. Like, that I had a personal connection to Peter Parker, or to Logan as Wolverine, or to any of the member of the X-Men. When I read their exploits or their adventures, I actually felt like I knew the person that it was happening to. So that made me less lonely as a child, which made, for me, that's one of the things that I always look for in a story when I'm reading one and when I'm actually trying to create one. I'm always looking for that kind of connection. But that's, like I said, it's a very personal relationship to story that makes it great, I think. So what about you, Jones? What do you think?
Well, I think you bring up an interesting question there, like, because when thinking about this subject and what you just said, I had that thought of like, oh yeah, what are stories from our childhoods that really resonated with us and what still are or something. But what you just said about character, right, that certainly makes me think about like the Chris Claremont, John Byrne run of X-Men, right? Like there are very many good storylines within it, but I really just kind of think of it as sort of that one long run that's really, really effective. And then to your point, like, well, why did that affect me so much? Why did I care about it? And it's because I think the characters seemed so real. It was like things were happening to my friends that I really cared about. So it's going to be interesting to talk to Sean as the writer of, when you first see that question of like, what makes a good story, there's a tendency to want to go, well, let's talk about Robert McKee. Let's talk about Blake Snyder, and you've got Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 in your story structure, and all that stuff's really important. But what Jeff just brought up, and it made me think about some of the things that made me think about the childhood the most or whatever, whether it's Chris Claremont, John Byrne, or even if it's Han Solo, Princess Leia, and Luke Skywalker. Mm-hmm. It seems like the characters are really important. I mean, they're more important than the story structure, or is character an aspect of story structure? I don't know. Let's ask the writer.
Character. I mean, my freshman year in college, I took a writing class from a guy named Emmanuel Fried, who's was a playwright, had a couple plays produced in New York, but was known for off-Broadway stuff. And the most important thing he taught was he put on the board the first day: character leads to action, leads to plot. The character, everything starts with the character, and you don't, and that's what makes a good story. I mean, and a great story. A good story can be just all plot, but I don't see the point in that. It's
right.
It's what Jeff said about feeling. And when I was a kid, it was the stuff that you guys are all talking about. Also, the '60s Teen Titans. I was really into that, especially after they did that whole storyline that nobody remembers anymore, where the guy who was like a combination of RFK and MLK got shot, and the Titans couldn't protect him, so they give up their powers and try and find what else they could do in the world. And that kind of stuff fascinated me.
Oh,
because,
I don't remember
because,
that at all. Yeah.
I could see that. As a kid, I could see if you're a teenager, you're gonna fuck up, and then what do you do? So that kind of stuff, it really resonated with me. And Peter Parker resonated with me a lot because the nerd stuff. And my favorite Spider-Man stories, people are tired of hearing me say this, I'm sure, are the ones that are like half Spider-Man fighting a villain and half Peter Parker's pals and gals.
Oh yeah.
It's why the Ramita Gil Kane stuff is so effective. And it's interesting you bring up the Titans, Sean, because we're that tiny bit younger where I couldn't buy those ones you're mentioning on the stands, but then me, Scott, and Jeff were the target audience for Marv and George's run on New Teen Titans.
Me too. Remember, I had stuff around the house because my brothers were so much older than me, so it wasn't necessarily the stuff I bought. I was in the Martin Wolfman run too, but that '60s one, just as a 8 or 9 year old, just sort of blew my mind. Like, superheroes can fuck up. Holy shit! Then what do they do?
Well, I seem to remember people, sort of later saying Marv and George were just sort of trying to copy the success of the X-Men or what. But then what's interesting is that though there were many good storylines in the Marv and George stuff, it was that I fell in love with those characters. Robin and Nightwing and Corey. All those characters, like they all just felt like real people. It's funny, Sean. Something that just flashed in my mind. I for some reason, like, I've always remembered reading, because I think after I got the job helping out doing backgrounds on Aquaman when you were writing it, I think you must have forwarded your original pitch to me for some reason. Or I mean, how on earth could you have forwarded it though? This would have been, so maybe you would
would have been on paper.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. So, but I mean,
a swallow would have delivered it.
So maybe Ken Hooper,
by the
penciler, had a copy over at Jeff's house or something. But I remember reading it, and to this day, I remember it. What stuck with me is, like, in your first few paragraphs, like when you were describing Aquaman, like it's kind of like what you're saying, which you're like, look, people seem to have forgotten that this man is a king, And I remember you had the word king in all caps in your little description, where it was kind of like that your mission statement was to sort of try to regain some, missing respect for this character. I was really, I've talked about this ad infinitum, but one of the things that was really conflict was the editor, was that I wanted it to be about emotion, and the editor wasn't really somebody who understood that in storytelling. But my whole thing with Aquaman was that he'd been king. He was Namor, but he was Namor who wasn't pissing everybody off around him. And he kept leaving to go do all this other stuff. And when I came into the series, his son is dead. His wife has left him, and he's not really welcome back in Atlantis anymore. So it's about someone who's gone through a lot of trauma, trying to find his place in the world. And, Aquaman was one of my favorite heroes when I was a kid. My favorite superheroes were Aquaman, Captain America, and Luke Cage, in that order. The thing about Aquaman that got to me was that he was a hero. He was a good guy. He was genuinely a good guy. And as the stories progressed into the 70s and 80s, they sort of lost that, and he became just sort of like a mechanical, like 1940s comics. A lot of them, you could just interchange the characters.
and
Well,
I wanted to
I
go
always
back
like
and deal
Jim.
with that.
I always
Yeah.
like Jim Aparo, like, but what's, I mean, on a side note, I thought you only spoke English. I didn't know you spoke ad infinitum, but something.
It's very hard. It takes
It's
forever
my
to learn.
yeah, it's my fourth
It
language.
takes a lot of repetition.
English, Dutch, French, ad infinitum.
Infinitum, yeah.
Worse than Latin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've got a soft spot for Aquaman, and that increased even more now that I've moved to a place where I'm able to swim every day. But I think my favorite, you had that great story. I think it was Aquaman in Gotham or something.
Yeah.
Where you
Go to New York.
And it was that great, conceit of like, okay, well, Aquaman loses his strength. He has to get back in the water after an hour. But then there was like, and so people were sort of counting on that. But then because the whole story happened in the pouring down rain, it was like, oh, well, Aquaman never needed to get back into the water. He was retaining his full power.
Right. Well, cool. I was told when I started, you have to find some way to get rid of the 1 hour time limit, because the way it was before that was 59 minutes. He's great. 59 and 45. He's out. He can be easily murdered. And the first convention I ever went to as the writer of Aquaman, the first question I got was, this guy stood up and said, so what happens if Black Manta traps Aquaman in a Piper Cub, which I love the specificity of that, and drops him in the desert?
Mean, you're going to have to Google me that one. What's a Piper Cub?
It's a small personal airplane that you can buy for like $25,000 or something like that. It costs
oh my god,
car.
that's a deep cut.
Yeah. But I thought, well, what if it's like diabetes? It's not. He doesn't just pass out. He gets weaker and weaker unless he gets water. And then what if he's in the rain? Well, then he's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I got hate mail over that.
Really?
But I'm sure.
Yeah. The story was a guy trying to find his place in the world and being sort of emotionally bereft. Bereft is how you say it in ad infinitum.
Yeah. the accent's always moving around.
Do you trill the R?
That is exactly how you would pronounce it in New Zealand as well. Bereft. So.
But I think emotion, if you don't have emotion, then what's the point? Why are you doing the story?
Right. Well, I think it's interesting that you're talking about the one of the things that you liked about Aquaman is that he is the emotional side of a character who is bereft and trying to find his place in the world. And I would say that's exactly what was interesting to me about Wonder Man as a character always. And then when I worked on the book, that was always my horse to beat. Like, cause I'm like, this is like, what's happening with him and Jerry. And we got involved in major plots and huge crossovers and whatnot. But what was always important to me is like, what's going on for Simon? Like, how does it affect him? And I think that's one of the reasons that people like that book, apart from it being fun and silly and whatnot, like that I tried to make him as human and relatable as possible. Cause everyone who's reading these books, whether you're a teenager or in your 20s or whatever age, all humans are always going through this. Like that's
right.
I have yet to, we were talking earlier about getting your shit together, and I have yet to meet anyone that's really done that. At least 100%.
Well, and Simon has a goal, right? He wants to be an actor, and everything's it's not just the supervillains and stuff. It's everything's getting in the way of his real goal. Right. Including being a supervillain, but also the fact that he's got those weird eyes and he's indestructible, so he makes for a great stuntman. But then he's trapped as being a stuntman, and everybody thinks there's another job for them someplace, or that if I only got the right chance, I could go do this.
Right, I'm destined for blank, whatever that might be. If I could just get my break, or if I could do the thing, or if I could
get my shit together.
Or I could find the magic sword or the magic ring, or I could get that spell, or I could do whatever thing, which I think is interesting because that's where I have studied the mathematics of storytelling to trying to break down, like, this happens on this page, this has to happen on that page. Here's these moments in time. And even I've taken all the emotion out, but they are actually emotional they should be emotional moments, like that dark moment of the soul, right? That midnight of the soul at the end of Act Two, like that's a plot point, story structure point. But like, if your character isn't actually going through something, you don't care. Nobody cares.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's right, because it seems like, I guess if you take it from a plot structure point of view, then it's like, then you have to do this tremendous amount of work to build a character and things that they want and all that. I can see why you would go character, action, plot, because if you go plot, then basically you just have to reverse engineer it. You have to go like, well, what could a character want so much that would make them feel this way, or be, like, it does feel, I could see how it could feel a little backwards building the story that way,
But there are a lot of writers, especially in television, especially in children's television, and I think in comics, not so much in comics anymore, but the mechanics of the plot are all that matters. And, I hated being in story meetings as soon as somebody said that works. It was like, it doesn't need to work. It needs to push.
Right.
It needs to make somebody feel something. I got a question. So we're all involved in these characters, but do you have to like the character, or can you be involved with a character who's, someone you might cross the street to avoid?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, especially because I think the engine of any really good story is not necessarily the hero; it's the villain. So if you
Right.
if you don't understand your villain or why they're doing what they're doing, I mean, they have their own arcs, right? They have to have a believable and relatable and even sympathetic arc for you to really. I mean, I'm not going to deal with whatever happened to Darth Vader in the long haul, but like he was always a super compelling character, at least in the first three movies for me. Like I was interested in him. Um, and Doctor Doom's the same way. Like I love Doctor Doom. I think he's one of the greatest villains because he actually does want to bring order and protect his people and is in a way quite noble, even though he's very flawed. So yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, he's an emotional mess. That's why he's Doom, is because he can't control his emotions and he can't control his jealousy. But he wants to rule Latveria with an iron hand, and he realizes in a way that the way to do that is that you have to make the people happy at a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's really cool about him.
Yeah, he's a great character. So I do think, yeah.
Go on. No, go on.
I was going to say that, yeah, no, you have to know, at least for me, especially when I'm drawing someone, I have to understand who they are for me to make them believable. Like, I know I've told the story to you guys before. Like, I thought I drew a really crappy Superman because I don't get, he's always, whenever I drew him, he always seemed very posed. He always seemed very like cardboard cutouty. Because because my idea of him is that he's not the way, he has so much power that he doesn't move like a regular person. And I never really figured out how to make him move that did not seem hollow and I mean, I always felt like I was drawing the facade of Superman.
Usually you had all of us pose very often and take pictures, and maybe when you were doing Superman, you should have not actually used cardboard cutouts. That's one thought.
Wait. He was doing that for comics?
No, listen, you guys should not talk to each other about this. This is a different show. But yeah, I never got a handle on it.
So we talked about like what moved us. What else besides? I think we're all agreed on that, on most of the stuff. What about movies and TV and stuff? Because it. Growing up for us, TV was pretty emotion free unless you were looking at soap operas. It was, pretty much ABC storytelling. What else moved you?
Well, I mean, so Scott and I just last night started rewatching the old Twilight Zones. I had forced us, I had forced us to watch the old Wild Wild Wests, which I remembered as being great, and they did not live up to my memory of them.
My friend Alan was a villain in one of the early episodes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, he was not. Robert Conrad did not like him because Alan was 6'4" and gay.
Oh, well, yeah.
That would pretty much do it.
Yeah, it was pretty much.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
the
for God's
antithesis.
sakes. Yeah, he was telling me the story. And she's like, "Oh, for God's sakes, just go over and tell him I'm a big old queen. What's wrong with him?"
Well, I mean, I liked Conrad a lot, and he was definitely his fight scenes were awesome, and I remember that back in the day.
Yeah.
And I do think that my memory of the stories was a lot. I I embellished quite a bit for those,
Yep.
but the fight scenes were fantastic. But so now we're kind of going back, and last night we started watching the old Twilight Zones, and those all have a huge emotional hook, and they take the viewer for a ride and then spin you around at the end. So I do think that there is a journey involved, and so I think one of the things that I think makes a great story for anything is taking you on that kind of emotional journey. Like you feel like you've experienced something at the end of the story.
What's remarkable
Which can be
about
really,
them, though, is when just you think about like how quickly they're getting you to hook into and care about characters in a very,
Mhm.
they don't have a lot of time to throw characters into a situation that's, strange and unique and try to get and invite you to care about what's going to happen to those characters.
Yeah, well, that's some good writing. That's some great Rod Sterling writing. Like that stuff
Yeah.
is fast. Well, so
It just
to that,
shows
like Scott,
Anti-fascists write good.
right. So Scott actually talking about like making a good story for like, and I think that first moment is one of the things that really makes a story. Scott actually had some first pages of comics that he wanted to talk about, which I thought was a great way to do this. Hang on a second, Scott.
Yeah.
Let's
Oh wait,
talk about.
is Scott's microphone working today? I didn't know.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, but Steve, let him draw this.
I'd say I was busy drawing while you were just
Hi, Scott.
Yeah,
Welcome to the podcast.
Which
hello.
Awesome.
That's Space Fiend. Who is that?
Space
Space
Phantom.
Phantom.
Space Phantom.
Space Phantom.
Yeah.
Avengers number 2, I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
Well done, Dr. Jones.
I would have
He-
thought Fantastic Four for some reason, but I think you're right.
No, it's Avengers. Yeah. He replicates. He was like the Skrull version for the Avengers, and the Skrulls would
Right.
imitate who the FF were, and Space Phantom went around thinking or imitating Iron Man and Hulk and Thor and all those guys for a while, getting him in trouble with the public. Now thinking, oh my gosh, these aren't nice superheroes.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting hook for issue 2 of the Avengers, to have these characters and then have someone mess with their reputation.
Well, that was a running thing with Marvel stuff right from the get-go. Not only was there the emotional turmoil with a lot of the main characters, echoing what you guys were saying before about emotion being, really necessary or helpful to making a good story. That's why we got wrapped in right away with, Thing and Torch always fighting against each other, or whoever it was, or they would always like insert now that Hawkeye would be the guy, or Quicksilver would be the one who would be like the real nudge against the leader and picking fights and all sorts of stuff. But also the mistaken identity and just superheroes not being assumed to be the good guy that everybody would love, that there would be the Jana Jonah Jamesons or whoever in the public that would be then afraid of them because they did have the Thing.
Right.
They did have
Right.
these odd looking characters, even Iron Man, looking inhuman or whatever that he was, or Spider-Man
Right.
with his full face mask could be scary. So yeah, those are running themes. But the first page stuff, if you've got any of those ready.
I do. Here is.
I think
this
part of the
one.
importance of a good story is, hooking you in with a really good page one. And I tried to grab a couple different ones. So this one was mostly a visual, though all of Chris's writing in there was all really cool too. But just the giant title of the page, and then that setup alone was a great hook. It gives you, an interest in here. And it already plays to the strengths of, who are the bad guys, who are the good guys. Even though Wolverine doesn't necessarily look like a good guy, he's already beat. He's already, he's wet, he's roughed up, his costume's torn, all that stuff, and he's hiding in the first one. So our sympathies already lean towards him versus these guys with guns and the inhuman faces that they have, where they're hunting him, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's an iconic splash page, but it also it leads in directly from an iconic last panel of a page, which
Right.
were that comic done today, it would have been a it would have been a last page that would have been a full splash. It's amazing that it's just one strip panel, but just that one where Wolverine, like, you know,
In the sewers. Yep.
Yeah,
No, today that would be a 2-page spread at least.
yeah.
Right.
Because you get more money at the convention for that original art.
Yes.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things if we want to talk about that, which I think we should to some point, like what all the things good storytelling has to fight, consumerism, marketing yourself, getting attention. Like sometimes those are antithetical to actually telling a good story because
Oh,
this
absolutely.
works- yeah.
Plus,
It's funny you
also what
mentioned that,
Jones.
'cause- go on.
Go ahead.
Ted. No, you go.
I was going to say what Jones was talking about before also relates to this and related to how he brought up the previous end of the issue and then related to this the beginning of the issue. Part of the magic of the good stories that we were given wasn't the Rod Serling Twilight Zone short story snippet of a story that really had to take you really fast, explain what it needed to explain, give enough mystery or enticement to it, and then be done with it. The magic of some of our comics of a lot of our youth was that we did get that sprawling kind of never ending quite story for 3 years or longer, whatever it was, whether it was Stanley and Gil Kane on Spider-Man or any of those guys with Ramita or these guys on X-Men or Wolfman and Perez on Titans. That was part of the magic of it, was that they often tried to very hard to make sure that each issue was its own enticement. But the real magic of knowing and understanding and feeling so deeply about these characters was getting that same team, that same feel of stuff, not changing every 3 months, but continuing on for years where you could keep reading that, which is why I think most of the kids these days, even in America, are reading so much manga because they know they can read that for 3-5 years or whatever at a shot, a real length of time, and feel like they're really getting a full examination of this character and the great heights or the depths or the low points of whatever that the characters are going through.
God, you feel like what really appeals to them is that they're getting the never-ending story.
Exactly.
Well, part of it is that it's done so different now that I have a feeling like Chris and Byrne and first of all Chris and Dave Cockrum, and all hail Dave Cockrum because I think he really
absolutely
set the pace for a lot of that stuff. But they were allowed to develop those stories organically, because nobody really gave a shit at the beginning. And now you have to present them. These are going to be our first 12 issues, and then when that's over, here's going to be our next 12 issues. So you don't build something organically, and that goes on in TV too. And a lot of this, when I see stories, I can almost hear the executive's voice in my head saying, "You know what would be really great." And it doesn't have anything to do with the story or anything like that. It's just we think that we should have a big transformation scene here.
Yeah.
Right.
And you get a product placement here.
Back then, sometimes literally it would just be like a team would be given a book, and it was like a book that was not selling very well, and then maybe no one would even pay attention to them for 12 months. I always laugh thinking about Scott has such a big and varied career, and there was one point where sometime I couldn't tell you exactly, sometime in the past 15 years or somewhere, or maybe even 20, they gave Scott and Keith Giffen this book called Larfleeze, Larfleeze is just this strange sci-fi character that is somehow related to the Green Lantern and DC space universe. And I think what happened was they're like, okay, Keith Giffen is a legend. Scott is like one of our, greatest working comic artists. He's doing all this great stuff. We don't really know what to do with them right now. Let's just park them on this book for a second, and then we'll figure it out. But then Keith and Scott are such workhorses that it was kind of like all the powers that be at DC got so focused on everything else, they suddenly turn on. They're like, "What do you mean you've done 18 issues? Of a character that." Probably is not someone that anyone would have ever made the conscious decision to give that many issues to. But it's like, well, look, if you give it to two veteran workhorses that are, they're just going to, all right, well, you gave us this guy, we're going to make a story about this guy,
Yeah. And they totally work, because Keith liked to be surprised by his own story. Right, Scott? So he would give you the just enough to inspire you to do stuff, and he would play off of that. So I think the whole series is kind of revolutionary in that you never know where it's going. But and it's epic. It's huge.
And Keith was given a whole bunch of license in that, where other writers would have to have done what Sean said of, make sure they had the 12-issue proposal. It had all to be buttoned down and what ahead of time.
Right.
But
And
because of
if it had been
Keith,
if it had been Hal Jordan, if it had been anyone else, they, again, they
Right.
would have just. So
Right.
just this sort of. You guys kind of got like a little trip back to the 70s just because they gave you this character that no one really knew about or cared about.
well, and that's part of it too, is that in some ways Keith just wouldn't work that way. There were times on Larfleeze and times on Blue Beetle where the editors were calling me going like, can you tell me what's going on with the book? I don't know what's happening in the next 3 issues. Because Keith was just like, no, or he'd lie to him or he'd do something else. Is like, no, you don't control this ship. I'm controlling this ship. I'll talk with my creative people that are working on this thing. We're going to run with this.
Right.
Keith
And there was a
was
bunch
close.
of that on Larfleeze too, actually.
Yeah, Keith was close enough with Paul to get away with that.
Yeah.
And Dan DiDio, they were all big proponents of him. And Keith, bless his heart, he did also have those big successes in his background. So there was always that roll of the dice going like, well, he did it for Justice League. He did it for
Well, no,
Legion of Superheroes. One of these could
exactly.
hit too. Come on.
Speaking of even before the amazing and like industry changing Justice League stuff with our friend Kevin McGuire, like it but childhood wise, like Marv Wolfman, George Perez, Teen Titans, Chris Claremont, John Byrne, X-Men, some of the Jim Shooter like Korvac Avengers saga, like those Keith Giffen, Paul Levitt's Legion of Superheroes, especially the lead up into and after the Great Darkness saga, that was like I cared. I mean, Rock Kryn and Val Armour and Alia Rands and all of the. I'm just nerding out there with the excuse to use Legion of Superheroes.
Jones is just flexing all over the place.
If you can hold on for a second, I'll run into my closet and get my Ultra Boy sweatshirt, which I have.
Oh God.
But
Awesome.
I can't get my Ultra Boy T-shirt because it's in the wash.
Aww.
You mean Joe Na?
Yeah, that's right, Joe Na, who was swallowed by the space whale.
He was swallowed by a
That's
space
right.
whale.
But those were characters they were in a lot of my brother's old comics too, and they were very important to me. And because they were kids and they were a team, and the X-Men too, early X-Men, they're kids, they're on a team, they're on their own, they have friends they can count on.
Tasmia Mauler. Well, a really interesting conceit about how they set up the Legion in the 70s, and and Cockrum and Mike Grell were part of this too in the lead up. And I guess it probably goes back to Shooter when he was like just literally a teenager. But something that's kind of fun about the Legion is that it's this giant cast, right? Like it breaks the conventional rule of like, the Justice League in the 60s, the Avengers. Generally, a team is supposed, like a small team is 4, like the Challengers of the Unknown or the Fantastic Four. Like a trio barely counts as a team or something like that. But you very rarely go above 6 and 7. And the fact that they just willfully did that. And then there also was that interesting thing in the Legion where the majority of the characters were not overpowered at all. They just kind of had one power. So they really had to work as a team. And then there was always kind of the thing of like, every so often, if they needed a Deus Ex Machina thing, you bring in Mon-El or someone that is one of the more overpowered members of the team. Even Ultra Boy is a great example where it's like, okay, Ultra Boy is essentially Superman, but he can only use one of his powers at a time. Right. It's a fascinating.
Right. So just so you know, the Legion Charter calls for only 26 members at any given time. If you go over 26, somebody else has to join. The Legion has auditions every year. For new members. You can't duplicate. I'm not going to say I was a big Legion fan, but you can't duplicate another member's powers except for Ultra Boy, Superboy, and Mon-El and Supergirl because they're all so valuable to the Legion that but otherwise, like if another Matter Eater lad showed up, no, we've already got one of those.
Interesting.
I really want to heat the geek alarm. Where's the geek alarm?
Yeah, some lights should be going off.
Wait,
I could go on, but I think I should be stopped.
Right.
I'm spacing on Matter Eater lad's name, please. Do you have that, Sean?
No, but he's from the planet Bismol, and he winds up being the president.
Well,
Wait,
I mean,
Pepto Bismol?
Is he
yeah.
Tenzil Kim? Is he Tenzil Kim?
Tenzel Kim. That sounds right.
That sounds right.
All right. There you go.
Scott saying that sounds right. Move it the
Yep.
fuck along.
Move along. Well, I think it's interesting though because we were talking earlier about like the relationship to the characters, right? So right there, you have a minimum of 26.
Right.
You have much more of they're not so much a sports team, but almost more like a high school
Right.
that everyone is part of, and so
Right.
it's
Yeah.
much it's much easier for a reader to find someone that they relate to,
But that's
and
fascinating.
all
That-
those
it should-
characters, right?
It should not work. I mean, and yet somehow all of those characters seem like very, in a way, I guess, the fact that there was so many, it allowed you to make kind of more extreme characters, because it's like, like in a smaller team, you might have more well-rounded characters, but in a large team like that, it's like, it's almost like a rainbow thing where it's like, okay, look, no, this character is actually yellow ochre. This character is crimson. This character
Right.
is, like we're
Yep.
not going like, red, blue, green, yellow. It's like you can get into these very specific colors.
And different
Scott,
personality
hit the
types too.
interior Greater Geek Alarm.
Yeah, yeah. All
I
right.
think, well, part of it is talking about the connections you make with them. The high school thing is a really good analogy because it felt like that, but it didn't feel like a high school where you're getting made fun of. And
Right.
it's a high school where all different kinds of creatures are accepted.
Right.
Yeah.
And needed.
Big time.
Right. That's the
And
thing. It's like
needed.
we need this guy. We need Matter Eater Lad. Right. That's
Right.
and he's a valuable part of this
There's,
association.
there's an element of the Gene Roddenberry future in there, mixed in
Yeah.
terms of like, hey, look, we fixed a lot of shitty stuff. And so from like a teenage perspective, it's like we fixed bullying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So-
A lot of that predated Star Trek, but then they leaned into it more, especially in the Cockrum. Was Levitz writing it then, the Cockrum issues, because they were even throwing some design elements from Star Trek in there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were.
Well, let's go to another one of my favorite opening pages. Well, because I think like
Yeah.
the premise, right? Just like how you begin is how you'll end, right? So I do think like getting that first, and when we were doing storyboards, I know one of the things I always struggled with. I don't know if Steve was, I think, better at this than I was. Like, how do you get into a scene? What's that first moment? What is the first? Yeah, what is the first thing that you're going to give to the viewer? And I think, as much as I love this this X-Men one, like this one too, like this old Captain Marvel one, like that's just
Yep.
very straightforward.
Yep.
Well, it's tough. I think in animation and film and TV are different than comics, right? You've the space versus time thing. I've always
Right.
been a big fan. There's a million examples of this, and I probably learned it before this, but I guess Goodfellas is always one of the best examples I can think of. This is like there's that scene near the end where Ray Liotta has kind of like started to lose his mind, where he's way too coked up, and it's like right near the end before he's about to be caught. And when they start that scene, he's like in the kitchen, and he's like he's narrating to us, and he's trying
Yeah.
to get the pasta sauce done while he's also trying to
Right.
handle like the drug distribution and his wife. And I always remember like when I'm almost positive, and I might have this wrong though. This is that funny thing about like Jeff remembering the Wild Wild West being better than it was. So
Mhm.
rewatching the scene, I may be remembering it wrong, but I always think about, I feel like that scene started with a series of close-ups of the kitchen, like where, because it was kind of showing how, I think part of what Martin was doing, Mr. Scorsese was doing in the, my friend Martin, he and I talked about storytelling a lot. I mean, he didn't speak back to me that much, but he's a great listener.
Right.
Like, I remember there just being all these kind of close-ups of the messy, crazy kitchen, and I felt like, okay,
Yeah.
the series of close-ups immediately put us into this space. But then the fact that it doesn't look like a cooking show, the fact that there's sauce like splattered all over, the ingredients are all over the counter, there's no like cleaning as you go. That series of close-ups immediately put us into the space, and it immediately let us know like the level of frenzy that was already going on before then they cut wide and established who was in the kitchen and what was going on. So
Yeah.
probably to a crutch level degree, I've often very much loved starting on an extreme close-up when you're cutting into a scene and then cutting out, because I feel like it gives you some information if you're using it
Right.
properly, but it also creates a little bit of a question mark in the mind of the viewer, like, wait, what's going on? Where are we? Okay, I'm being given some information, and that information is impacting. But because, luckily in film, TV, and animation, you can be on that for just a second. So if you're willing to do the drawing to do it, you can get all the power of that in a way that, this is a good example of what these guys are showing us, right? Like this is
This is this page from Dark Knight.
Dark Knight Returns.
This is Frank trying.
I was just gonna ask you to bring that up. I was thinking the same thing.
Right.
This is Frank trying to use filmic storytelling in comics, and the only way to do that is by going small like this, right? Or by just having a shit ton of pages, which is kind of the manga solution. Manga just goes, well, we're gonna have Sergio Leone style atmospheric shots, or we're going to have like tons of multiple shots and cuts and edits, because we're just going to basically give ourselves an unlimited amount of pages to do what we have to do.
Right.
Being a slave to the 22 to 24 pages a month definitely creates a situation where you might have to do a 16 panel page like this, which I personally don't recommend, but
it is time consuming, but it does emotionally grab you.
Does it? No, I'm serious, because we were talking about. I know you really like it, right, Jeff?
Well, so yeah, I do. I really like this. I think this is a great. This is a great opening page, because I do think, even though it is complicated, it's visually shocking, it's hard to follow. I do think that as you read it, it gives you so much history. It introduces you to what's going on emotionally with Batman and how it's different from before. So I think that, for me, I think it really works and I really enjoy it. But Scott and I are not on the same sheet of music when it comes to that.
Look, as it goes along, I think it's a great idea, and how it was played out. But for its time, as the reader, to me, walking in and looking at it, I had to read that page over and over and over again, just to piece it together, going like, wait, who's doing what now?
Right.
And it was much more like, then when I'd gone on to page 2 or this or that, it was a lot easier to digest. And I figured out what they were actually getting at was that he was retired and stuff. Now, when you mentioned the 16 panel page, this was inspired by doing Dark Knight stuff. This was a page I'd done for a Batman story, but I didn't do this on page 1.
You're telling on yourself there. It's like, wait, guys, you just did a 16 panel page.
Right. And what I had done, though, was when I had started my story, the editor had even commented at the time, and now this was a comic book that was done for digital, so it always had to be a page here and a page down there as the digital way it was going to be presented. Sorry about the glare.
Right.
Well, that didn't help. So I started off really slow. There were only 2 panels basically on the first page, and then a splash pagey on the second page for them when it was done digitally. And here, even as a comic book page, it's only the 3 panels, and nearly the same thing over here on the second half, if I can get it in there. They're splashing on top and on the bottom. But I chose it this way so that we had a very simple entrance. Like, this is the building we're in. The cops are coming in. The cops are seeing something horrible. Page turn. We see it's Batman over a dead body. And then we go on with the rest of the story. Once we got past the initial shock of the story, what went on, that there's a dead body and stuff, then I did a 16 panel page because I wanted to have all these people that lived in this building that we have already said that it was this building that the stuff happened in.
Right.
Then he could go door to door and start doing some detective work and talking to the people in the story, and have some clues in there sprinkled in with a lot of little jokes and humorous garbage and stuff like that. And by the way, the main character here that's doing the detective work is a Jack O'Halloran. I took this also from Dark Knight. That's one of the fake IDs that Frank gives to Batman in the name of the story. Anyway, I think you could do the 16 panel page on page 1 and stuff like that. But what was actually done on the Dark Knight, I didn't think it told well, because it was way too much obscurity of everything going on. Plus, he never really shows us the car. I never actually see that there's a race going on. And some of that is cool, but some of it to me was too much, where I was already a fan of Frank Miller. I was already a fan of Batman. So there was enough hype behind this that I struggled through this page 1 to get to page 2 and then on from there. And I think his obscure storytelling later on comes off a lot better than it
Right.
did here on page 1.
That's
Well, I mean,
what
that is
was
that is
thinking.
interesting, and it's so much different than this one.
Right.
Right.
Well, go back to the Frank Miller page for a second.
Sure.
So, what occurred to me when you guys put this up earlier is, if this wasn't Batman by Frank Miller, and if it was a character you'd never heard of
Right.
and a creator you'd never heard of, would you open up the book and the first page and see this and think, "Oh, this is great. This is exciting"? Or
That's a great. I
because
mean, that's a great
we were all
question.
so hyped for this when it came out.
Right, because here's the thing. I don't think that this is the first page. I know it's the first page, but for me, that first image of the cover is the first page.
Right.
Like that's the
Yes.
image I have in my mind.
That's
as
a
the
strong
first
argument,
page.
Jeff. Yeah. Like,
Um,
if that iconic image that you showed last week is that's your cover,
yeah,
and then you open it to this. I mean, that's something. Like,
Oh, it goes a long way to pushing you through the story, going like, "Oh my God, Batman and the lightning bolt. This is so incredible." And then you
Right.
flip to this. But
right.
that's
right.
a little
So
bit one of
I-
those bait and switch to me.
yeah, but also keeping. I do think that had it not come pre-garnished with that initial image, there's no way I would have made it through this
We didn't-
without putting the book down. I would have been like,
But
I don't know what this is.
I haven't looked at the whole book in a while, but we'd have to. But what I'm remembering though too is like we've got the cover and it's so iconic, but it's still a silhouette. It's all dark. As I remember, the whole lead up is pretty cramped until
Yeah.
we finally get to that
Yes.
final like I'm 30, I'm 20 again, I'm 30 again, and he's leaping, like that.
Right.
It's like
So
he keeps.
There's a
keep-
pretty big when the guys are trying to mug him. That's a bigger image on the page too.
There's that
It's
one,
like-
and
isn't
there
that
is a
long?
shot when him and Gordon are talking near the beginning, and they're
Right.
talking about Bruce's Batman's retirement during that time, and now he's kind of sorely missed or something like that. And it's little staccato moments. It's like you see the glass with the ice cubes, or you see a little bit of this or a little bit of that, and that kind of thing, pieces of the thing. But then he would
Right.
pull back for one last shot, and then it would be like a half page or something like that. So he'd
Right,
still
and
wind up
Steve-
getting like 8 panels on the page.
But,
Right,
like, I
Steve's
think-
right, but it's building to that big image
Agreed.
of him. I'm 20 again. I'm 30 again. Steve's dead right
Yeah.
on that.
Something
Well, I mean,
Oh,
how
it
do
was
you hook? I
explosive.
mean, yeah, part of I think good storytelling is like how do you in that first page, that first moment, that opening scene, that first line, right? Like "Call me Ishmael" was always. I mean, I know it's one of the classic ones, but it's just such a great one. And even though I can't remember it verbatim, the Stephen King first paragraph for the gunslinger is super compelling and makes you want to keep reading. And so I do think like that whole idea of like how do you hook your reader? Like how do you get them into the story? And Scott really likes this one, but I actually think this one suffers from the same thing. Like there's so much going on, I don't know where to go. Except that
It is
when that-
complicated,
but that
but
bottom
this is a
that-
complicated book.
yeah. And which book is this,
Sorry,
Scott?
Sean.
Oh, this is the first. This is the Alan Moore takeover of the Swamp
Yeah.
Thing. This is an amazing
Right.
splash page.
Yeah. So it's complex, and it is now, but at least for visually, they did put that big face in the center with the eye, and there is the
Mhm.
big graphic on the bottom of the parts, and it called the anatomy lesson. So I think there's enough visually to grab you. But yes, do you then have to be like an old school comic book guy to go like, all right, I'm going to start on the top left. I know to start on
Right.
the top left. It's not very obvious to do that on this page. But and if you then actually take the time and you read it, like we're supposed to do with these comic books, then by the time you finish this first page, you're like, holy cow, this is an
Right.
amazing beginning to a horror story. I have got to read this story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's like the idea of like getting someone to have that feeling, oh, I have to know what happens next. I
Yep.
think that's
Absolutely.
yeah,
And
that's
because you
definitely
care-
the
That's
craft.
because you care about. That's because you care about the characters.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
It's a mystery that must be solved. It's someone I have
Yeah.
a feeling for. It's a group of people that I feel that I want to hang out with. All of those hooks. And then there's this thing. Look at that, Scott.
He's coming together as a mad piece.
I do love watching the process of you putting in. I love the your space background, your version of the Kirby dots, the Collins
Yeah.
dots
Yep.
are pretty great.
Hopefully, I will get there soon. Are we running out of time? Ooh, we're starting to run.
Yeah,
out
we
of
got
time.
10 minutes.
Getting back to something that Sean mentioned earlier, I'm appreciating how often people are saying that Steve is right in this episode. I just wanted to circle back on that.
It's your birthday, isn't it?
Well, close
it's,
enough.
it's recent, yeah.
But yes, that point should be underlined.
Yeah,
Well, Sean,
appreciate
I have a writer question for you. Do you
Like-
think, because I know as a comic book storyteller, it's a craft, and I've studied it and tried to figure out the math and try to demystify it for myself. Do you think that that some people are just inherently better storytellers, or that there is always a craft that can be learned, even for someone who might not seem like a natural at it?
Oh, I think there's a craft to it that can be learned, and I've worked with some of those writers.
Mhm.
You know, they're the ones that talk only about the math of the story and things
Right.
like that. I think there are people who are born storytellers or created as they're growing up. But to me, it's the merging of the two. Is like the hardest thing for me was to learn the mathematics stuff of storytelling, and then the hardest thing was to let go of it. And it's a part of you, and let it come through. But it really needs to be about people and their feelings, or characters and their feelings, and why they're doing these things. I think there's a lot that can be learned, but I think there's an empathy that a really good writer needs to have that a lot of writers don't have. You have to empathize with your characters and understand why they're doing what they're doing. Much like an actor, Steve will back me up on this. You have to, you have to think about every character is the star of the piece,
Mhm.
and they want something and they need something. And that's what really drives the story forward. So yeah, I think there's definitely things you can learn, but I think there's some people who just will only take it that far. They want the formula, they want the math equation, and that's the story, and that's all they care about.
Well, I definitely think that the math stuff is something, because whenever you don't know what to do, whenever you can't
Yeah.
feel it or you don't know what to do next, you fall back on the formula for sure. Like, oh, I guess I need this moment here. But I remember once I was drawing a cover for Way of the Rat, and the cover is for the third trade paperback, the third story arc. And thanks, Scott, that you just had that on tap.
Ta-da! That's the first trade, though.
Amazing. But anything, one of the things that I was drawing covers, a cover for and it's a bunch of, he winds up dealing with a bunch of ghosts throughout the city. All these ghosts get released and brought into back into the human world, and the main character Boone has to deal with the fight a bunch of them. And I did this cover where like a bunch of them are coming up out of the ground and flying past Boone, and I showed it to Chuck Dixon, and he went and he pointed to one of the characters like, this guy, what's this guy's story? And I had a story for him, and he goes, and this guy, what's this guy's story? And I had a story for him too. He goes, you have a story for every one of these characters, don't you? I'm like, yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't I wouldn't know what they were doing or why they were there.
Mhm.
And I think that that's you said, like, every character is the main character in that story, even if they might happen to be just a background character in the
Right.
comic.
You want every character to feel like they have a life outside of this story.
Right.
We're only seeing part of this world, and that you want people to believe that the characters go off screen and have things happen to them and come back. And
Right.
so, yeah,
Now-
go on.
Just so this doesn't go off the deep end, that story can just be that you're drawing someone like all those people that are running from ghosts, going like, okay, this one's got her groceries and she's trying to get home quick. Or this
Right.
one is scared looking for their dad. Or it's not like you have to know their, beginning and end and all these other things going on. It's
Right.
usually just in relation to whatever the image is or the story moment is.
Sure.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. Knowing that, oh my God, I've got to draw this businessman and his briefcase just opened up, or anything going on with him. It's like, to me, when we were always told in the back of the day of like, if you're drawing some businessman's desk or you go into some character's bedroom, populate that room, make it a
Yep.
real room for that person. Put something on the desk, a photo from a family member or a loved one. Put a
Right.
toy in there if they, could relate to them, or do something to make them look like they actually lived there.
Yeah.
And those are great ways to give clues to the story too, and to give
Yes.
points or character points. Like if you see, I don't know, just because I was reading an article about it, if you saw Auric Goldfinger and in his lair, and behind him was a picture of a little boy and a little girl, you'd wonder, is that him and his sister, or is that? And it would make him a sort of a more rounded character, despite Gert Frobe's width. But
Right.
it tells the audience, even subconsciously, stuff about the character.
Right. Like in that scene of The Simpsons, You Only Move Twice, where Scorpio pulls sugar out of his pockets and gives it to Homer. Like,
Yeah.
where did he get that sugar? Why does he have so much sugar? What is he doing with that?
Yeah. You can get into the weeds on that stuff really fast, though, too. Like
Yeah.
Scott said, you can, I mean, Steve will probably back me up. There are some actors who will kill an entire rehearsal because all they want to do is tell you the entire life journal they made for their character before rehearsal.
Right.
Right.
I'm glad you've done that work. What matters is what happens here today.
Yeah. And how the past affects that moment in storytelling, I think it is layering.
It's certainly a really great moment in speaking, in the new Wonder Man series, that first episode.
He does that exact thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He kills it. That scene was so uncomfortable.
So
for me,
painful.
that
Really tough.
I almost couldn't make it through. I'm like, oh, he's doing the thing. Oh, that's
By the way,
worst.
I watched the first 3 episodes, and I'm stopping because as we've gotten to the point is I don't give a shit about the superhero stuff. I want a story just about Simon and Trevor knocking around Hollywood, trying to get work with Simon knowing he has superpowers, and Trevor having everybody looking at him going, "Weren't you a terrorist?"
Oh yeah.
I want that show.
There's
a bunch of that in there. I wouldn't stop.
Yeah.
There's a really good twist about 3/4 way through where you think like, oh, some of this stuff was throwaway of what they put in just as stuff you mentioned. I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's like, oh wait, that was a great turn. I didn't think they were going to use that.
Well, the show, one of the Community guys.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I do think that it's I think it does a great job of making Simon even though it's not the Simon from the comic, I think it is at heart the Simon from the comic. Like
Yes.
I think they went deep, and they got, I think, the core of what I think has always been interesting about that character is that who am I? What am I doing here? Why am I doing it? What, I feel, am I special?
And I don't want to be different. I want to fit in.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
So yeah, keep going. I think you'll keep going. And Scott, look at that. Oh, you added the. So why did you pick that character, Scott? Is it just because you wanted to draw someone creepy?
Yeah.
Well, he is Kirby designed.
Yeah.
He is a Kirby design, but a lot of it was just, his creep factor was so fun and so cool. And I had drawn him once before, very briefly, and I thought it'd be fun to draw him again.
I love that.
Yeah.
Space Phantom.
I had to go back and double check that I was right on the Dark Knight. It's amazing how much of Dark Knight in that first half is 16 panel pages. It's kind of crazy. Has anyone ever seen any Dark Knight originals? Because I'm wondering if they were huge.
Well, we have. I don't have it, but Scott has the giant book,
the Artifact edition or whatever. That's the print of it, or the culmination, or gathering all the pages. Yeah, it's big. It was done for. DC had different paper at that time that was done for like graphic novels or other material. For their different imprints and stuff, and he was using that stuff, so it's a little bit bigger than the 11x17. I don't know if it's quite twice up, but it might be.
It's big. Yeah, it's not old school Fantastic Four big, but it's pretty big.
Yeah,
and they're a little bit wider, I think. With that other format, the pages were a little wider. Marvel used to have that too for some of their graphic novels, that it wasn't the exact 11x17 that we all draw on. There was like an extra like half inch or inch to that page that was more book sized or magazine sized. They were done more for that.
With those magazines they tried in the 60s, the Spider-Mans they tried in the 60s, they were that really weird size.
At some point, it might be worthwhile to do an entire episode on Dark Knight at some point, but it's interesting now as I look where it's like it's almost all that 16 panel grid until the big payoff shot of Batman jumping. Again, occasionally we get a few slivers here of a bigger shot, and then right after we have that giant shot, then it's a series of 7 horizontal panels. The first time he does that in the entire thing, and then we switch to an 8 panel structure. 8 4 vertical, 4 vertical. Like once Batman enters the story, we throw away that 16 panel structure. So it's pretty remarkable the level that the guy's working at.
It was a great experiment in pacing. It worked really well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think if he sticks with it, he might get somewhere, that guy.
Yeah, it's possible. Well, guys, I think so that's an hour. What's funny is I knew that this topic would be really interesting because we've only got into like that a great story has to have an emotional connection for the reader to the character and the first page. That's how far we've gotten.
So shall we tell them what we did last time we turned off the show?
Oh, we had great conversations. We continued to
We
talk.
kept talking about the topic for another half an hour after we turned the show off. And I'm like, why did we turn the show off?
Yeah.
Well, do we want to do part 2 next week?
Yeah, let's keep
build on that.
Yeah, we'll
Part
end
2,
on,
that's a part of a story thing too, isn't it?
yeah. Well, because I do think that
it's Act 2. Act 2.
Oh yeah.
Could be the sequel.
Yeah.
No, Steve Act 2.
We're
Sean
talking about Act
Steve
2?
Act 2.
Yeah. All right, at 2. All right, guys. That was great. So tune in next week. We will continue to ramble on about what we think makes a great story and how to deconstruct some of those ideas and generally just blather on. Oh, we didn't get. Oh, Jones, you missed the point where Sean got yelled at by Miyazaki.
You've heard that story, haven't you, Steve?
No,
We're going to tell that this time, or we're going to tell that story
No,
next?
we're gonna save it. So we're gonna end on a cliffhanger to keep you emotionally engaged, so
this
that
is
Sean will tell you
a long panel, long horizontal
Right,
panel, and then
the
we're
last
gonna do a
panel.
splash.
And the next splash page, maybe one of us will draw it, is Sean getting yelled at by Miyazaki.
Excellent.
right.
All
I
right,
wish I could
fellas.
say I was surprised. Okay.
Hang on a second. Here we go. 12 Cent Treehouse. We guys will see you all next week.
Bye, everybody.